My name is Mike Butcher. I'm the editor-at-large of TechCrunch. Hello. So I'm here with some interesting people from the investment community in tech. Philipp from AngelList, Robert from SV Angel, and Michael from Golden Gate Ventures.
Yeah. Goodness
me. Now, the interesting thing is you guys are all here, who are here in Berlin, and it struck me recently that the nature of investing has got just way more international now. There used to be, who is it, the angel investor in Silicon Valley said, I will only invest in something I can skateboard to. And I think we're quite a long way from skateboarding now. And I guess it's just the nature of how the internet has just exploded across the planet, right? I mean, AngelList is now, you're going to be spinning some interesting stuff up in Europe, for instance.
Yeah, I think that we talked about this on the panel earlier. Companies are not just being built in Silicon Valley, obviously. But by now, the ecosystems here in Berlin, in London, Stockholm, etc., have matured so much that there's actually Series B, Series C type companies that need some real money. And the bigger investors are usually still from around Silicon Valley or other places in the US. And I think that just makes people travel more. And those large chunks of money, obviously, are more obvious. You know, they're more celebrated maybe than a seed round. But yeah, I think folks like you guys.
I mean, at the same time, SV Angel, doesn't do a lot outside the US.
Yeah, I mean, we're primarily focused on kind of US investments. But I mean, I do think it's a credit to the ecosystem here in terms of some of the companies that have been built. I think it's one, the transparency in the market too, about just being aware of companies and companies having to go international sooner. But also, Sam Altman from YC tweeted out last week, I think, saying that something like 40% of the founders in the current YC class are international and born from something like 30 different countries. So I do think, companies can be started anywhere these days, and just to keep your eye out for that.
And you must see that as well in Singapore. I mean, funnily enough, I often come across European founders who look to London or Dublin or Singapore, in fact, even often comes up on their radar. Why do you think that is?
Well, some of it is because of the Singaporeans are investing heavily into the whole tech ecosystem, and Singapore is trying to build really a tech hub for Southeast Asia, which also attracts foreign investors. But also we see, investors still from the US, but also from Europe, investing more and more into the Southeast Asian tech scene. More of because it's very young and it's so scalable. I mean, everybody's on mobile, everybody's changing their cell phone like every 6 months. So there's a huge market for also European tech companies and European investors in Southeast Asia.
What are some of the things that you've seen while you guys have seen here while you've been here in Berlin that have caught your eye, perhaps? Anything?
Well, I'm pretty familiar with the Berlin tech scene. One startup that I saw today I thought was interesting was an ice cream startup with frozen cocktails. Not techie at all. Just very nice for the weather here in Berlin.
One of the things I think has been interesting over the last couple of years, you and I know the Berlin scene quite well, is that there's been a lot of hype about it. And in fact, last year, in the last few months and last year, a number of Berlin companies have actually exited or merged. There seems to be some sort of change going on. Do you think that's the case?
I think so. I mean, it's the first companies that sort of get swallowed up by bigger ones. It's not yet, I think, the huge exits that we still hope for here. But I think that's good. There's some money being paid back. There's some money to be recycled. There's more angels. This is how we build the ecosystem slowly but surely.
There's been an interesting sort of love affair going on between Silicon Valley and the Berlin tech scene a little bit in the last couple of years. I noticed Ashton Kutcher was tweeting out Tap Talk just the other day.
Yeah.
It was a Berlin startup here.
Nice.
We ran that story on TechCrunch. What do you think it attracts you guys to the city?
I mean, I think there is this determination in the city, and there's this kind of grittiness in the city, and how I think Christoph on the panel had mentioned it, how this wasn't supposed to happen. There's no great university here. There's not a lot of money. There's not a lot of corporations, and how there's really just this innate desire within Berlin that people really want to do this from within. So there's great companies like TapTalk you mentioned that are being started here that are getting a ton of kind of buzz in the U.S. and attracting kind of U.S. investors like ourselves.
I mean, the TapTalk's a mobile app, of course, and
Sure.
the people are going after some of this messaging stuff right now. In fact, we just run a story just today on an app called Lulu that you sort of basically message people with song titles, songs. It's slightly crazy, but anyway, we'll take what we can get.
Yeah.
Do you find that in Asia that there's the appetite for apps and mobile is still going off the charts, or there's a lot of disruption going on in terms of a lot of companies being born and dying very quickly because of that sheer pace and speed?
So I wouldn't say it wouldn't be disruption, but it's really like Web 1.0 in Southeast Asia at this moment. But for instance, I tell everybody this story when I get on the subway in Singapore each morning. I don't care if there are 2-year-old or 95-year-old, everybody's holding at least 2 cell phones. So they're adapting so many apps like every single day. It's incredible. And I've seen so many companies here in Berlin. I would love to just grab and take them over to Singapore and to let them show what's happening in Southeast Asia.
There is a certain level of geographical arbitrage that some startups benefit from. So some of the companies in Silicon Valley are sometimes actually copying or at least adapting models that they've seen in Asia that are effectively sort of slightly hermetically sealed and cut off. And then similarly, many European companies often try and sort of ape US startups. Do you think that's ever going to change, or do you think innovation is just getting better and better?
I think that's getting better and better and shorter in terms of the time frame too. I think the world's getting obviously a much smaller place, and the days where companies can kind of launch and take 3, 5, 7 years to kind of figure out their model within their own market are kind of over. So I think people have to innovate quicker on business models and kind of almost launch simultaneously international at some point.
What I find really interesting is how, because the pace of technology change is so similar here in the US and in Asia, obviously different in different pockets, but things kind of pop up at the same time. So there might be 3 or 4 founders in different parts of the world having the same idea at the same time, and it's really usually a sign of the times. Everybody has a cell phone. Oh, suddenly all these messaging apps make sense, and then suddenly everybody has a cell phone and public transportation is crap, so suddenly these taxi apps all make sense, and there's enough people to use it and who can pay over the phone as well that it also makes sense for the other side of the marketplace. And that's something I think we just see much faster, much stronger, thanks to AngelList, thanks to TechCrunch, thanks to blogs who really look for these startups all over the world. And I think it's going to be interesting as an investor to see how that plays out. So at AngelList, there was one category where a couple of weeks ago we realized 4 companies in the same space were being syndicated or ran an online campaign. So as an investor, you don't actually have to pick one. You can just index all 4 and see which one is going to be successful. And that's a very inside baseball type adoption of that thinking. But I see that whether it's Berlin, it's Singapore, it's San Francisco, New York, a lot of people have the same idea at the same time.
Do you think that that's going to be something going forward where investors, instead of, say, doubling down on one particular investment, they might take sort of a spread bet approach to a number of similar companies in the same space?
I mean, we at SV Angel have kind of always taken a broader, more portfolio approach. I think, especially at the early stage, it's so hard to know, and companies pivot so quickly. And so, what we focus on as a fund is kind of deal flow. Unless you have great deal flow at an early stage, it's difficult. So to have those insights in terms of, seeing 5 really smart guys kind of working on the same space and having a light bulb go off and say, hey, like something's happening here. And then not only to have that insight, but to then be able to kind of take those companies and pick from them, I think it's a great position to be in.
Michael, in Asia, is it very easy to enter that market? How would you advise a European entrepreneur looking to scale up in Asia out of Singapore or something like that?
I would say it's getting relatively easy. Southeast Asia is a lot like Europe in that sense, with different countries, different cultures, different languages. You just need to know some local entrepreneurs that will help you, help you in the startup scene, and that's how we started actually. I mean, I'm European. Vinny, part of mine, is from America, and we started in Southeast Asia just by flying around the region and getting to know a lot of startups, getting to know a lot of people, doing these types of conferences. But then in Southeast Asia, the whole startup scene, and we're now 3 years out, and I think we know almost everybody, to be honestly. So it goes really fast, and as to SV, we're actually doing the same. We're trying to tap into, I would say, the same type of startups, but then in different countries. So we do a spread, but then regional. So we could do a payment startup in Singapore and do the same startup actually in Indonesia, and see what pans out.
Ultimately, though, often it does come down to funding. So, I mean, you look at a company like Uber, and they've raised so much money that, would there be any real point in trying to go into that space again yourself, or do you think it's still wide open, kind of anybody's game?
I think in general, when somebody starts out in the same space, it doesn't mean that they end up in the same space. And the same space doesn't mean the same business or the same business model or focusing on the same side of the marketplace. So I think that's the first consideration. The second is obviously, a lot of companies that expand internationally relatively quickly buy up competitors in other markets that are already entrenched. So I think that's a good exit opportunity for local investors. Happens time and again. But yeah, I mean, once you have a juggernaut like Uber, I think it does get difficult.
And finally, I'm going to ask you guys a little bit of a brain teaser. People are talking a lot about robotics and wearables and Internet of Things, all these kinds of buzz phrases floating about these days. What are the kinds of things that excite you at the moment, or going forward, say in the next, 10, 20 years? I mean, I'm wearing a wearable device here. It tells me about how much I move, which apparently is not nearly enough.
Nice.
What excites you, Philip?
I just helped launch a syndicate that solely invests in the drone industry. So navigation for drones, video systems, audio systems, everything around drones. And the angel that leads it says, look, we might drones, might completely be trashed by regulation, but that's pretty much the only real risk to this whole industry. And if I'm early enough and make bets on, on this whole industry that's super nascent at the moment, where almost nothing exists yet, then I'm probably going to make some money. So this approach really is interesting to me. I was pretty excited about that.
Interesting. So, yeah. Drones.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to this marriage of kind of software and hardware. Where you have these lightweight devices and these wearable devices, and to be able to what to do with software. We do very little hardware. I've just kind of started looking at the space. We did one drone company down in LA called Airware, which is basically building kind of like the DOS for drones. And then a recent one that's interesting called Lily out in San Francisco, which are basically personalized drones that you can kind of throw up in the air, follow you around as you're going skiing and things like that, or it's almost like the GoPro of drones. I think it's still really early, but there's obviously a lot of kind of interesting things happening in this space.
Personal drones instead of dogs, perhaps, or pets. How about you, sir?
So from a personal perspective, I would like to see 3D printing just take off massively in the consumer space. But from a fund perspective, I think the first startup that really disrupts the banking industry will get my support, definitely.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Well, hello to all those bankers out there. We're coming after you. Well, thanks, guys, for joining us here. I hope you have a great conference. See you later.